We'd like to welcome you to tonight's program, Electrifying Your Home. And now I'd like to introduce our speaker. Bruce Mainzer is a native of the Chicago area. After college, Bruce started out as a public transit planner working for the RTA and the Illinois Department of Transportation before embarking on a career in the travel industry with United Airlines, Hyatt Hotels, and Norwegian Cruise Line. Bruce is now retired and he's a resident of Highland Park, and he has served as chairman of the Transportation Advisory Group for the City of Highland Park, and he currently is the vice chair of the Chicago chapter of the Climate Reality Project. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Bruce. And now I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Beth, and also Grace Hayek of the Glencoe Library, and Juan, who's standing by right now, for doing this presentation with me. I'd also like to thank Kim Stone, council member from Highland Park, for helping to set up this meeting. And I also want to thank everybody on this video call. My name is Bruce Mainzer. I am a Highland Park resident, and I currently serve as the vice chair of the Chicago Metro chapter of the Climate Reality Group. The Climate Reality Project is focused on climate solutions available today. The organization was founded in 2006 by U.S. Vice President, or former U.S. Vice President, Al Gore. The Chicago chapter was founded in 2017 and was one of the first chapters formed in the country. Our chapter is one of over 100 chapters in the U.S. working to advance climate solutions at the local, state, national, and international level. Now, in today's session, we will discuss the climate emergency we are experiencing now, and also provide you with a path for addressing how we can all contribute to the solution. Many of us are aware that we all need to reduce our carbon footprint, and that includes actions such as eating less meat, buying fewer things, and buying things that will last longer, and flying and driving less. Those are all fine choices as well, but by far the biggest impact you can make is by electrifying everything in your home and your vehicle. So in this session, we will discuss how the Inflation Reduction Act, passed by Congress in 2022, which was the largest investment in climate anywhere in the world, can help us adopt solutions for our home and stop burning fossil fuels for your heat, for cooking, for washing your clothes, and of course, driving. To help, our chapter of Climate Reality, the Chicago Metro chapter, has adopted a pledge that you can take that sets you up to eventually replace your fossil fuel machines, from your car to your gas furnace to your water heater, when these machines reach the end of their useful life. The good news is that legislation has now made those choices easier, and sometimes an even better bargain than the fossil fuel machine that is currently working in your house or your garage. Now, climate change, many people know what climate change is all about, but I'll just quickly review it here. Basically, the Earth is warmed and we get all of our energy from solar radiation in the form of light waves which pass through our atmosphere. Now, most of this radiation is absorbed by the Earth and warms it. And some of this outgoing infrared radiation is trapped by the Earth's atmosphere and warms it. But as we add to the carbon dioxide concentration, and also methane gas and some other pollutants, into our atmosphere, more of this outgoing infrared radiation is trapped, and that is what's happening now. The Earth is just retaining too much heat from this greenhouse effect, basically blocking radiation from leaving the Earth. So we're continuing to spew 162 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into the thin shell of atmosphere that surrounds our planet every day, as if it's an open sewer. Now, one of the first people to warn us of the dangers of too much climate uh, warming gases was James Hansen, who in 1988, he was director of the NASA Institute for Space Studies. And in 1988, he briefed Congress on what was likely to happen if we don't stop spewing greenhouse gases. He was one of the first to help raise broad awareness of global warming. And in fact, Al Gore was a very active participant in that hearing in 1988. Most people just ignored what he said, but the scary thing is that everything he predicted that would happen to us 25, 30, 40 years later, 35 years later, has happened to a greater degree than he has even predicted. So now we have globally floods and extreme rainfall events that now occur 4 times more often than in 1980. And there have been 22 1 in 1,000 year downpour events in the US in the last 12 years. And this is because warmer air now can contain more moisture. So just as a bigger bucket can hold and dump more water, a warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor and therefore dump more water when it rains. This has led to disastrous floods and extreme weather events all over the globe. Just about an hour and a half ago, I was watching the national news, and the first 15 minutes described all the extreme weather events that are happening all over the country, from an avalanche at Tahoe ski resort all the way to severe flooding in the East Coast and winds in Florida and tornadoes in Florida, which used to never occur. So we are certainly seeing this in Chicago over the past 10 years with more flooded basements and extreme weather. This is a video from June 26, 2021, with heavy rain and flooding overwhelming Chicago's sewer system, bursting manhole covers, and sending geysers of raw sewage into the air. Yuck. Chicago's Deep Tunnel Project, which cost over $3 billion and was one of the largest public works projects in the nation, was designed in the mid-70s, and officials now admit that the tunnels that have been dug and the vast caverns that exist under Chicago cannot handle now the increased rainfall that Chicago has experienced. So we can expect more of this going forward. Now, everyone probably understands that with every year that it gets hotter, and 2023 was the hottest year ever, that means more forest fires and disastrous consequences for our environment. Now, we saw this firsthand in Chicago and most other cities across the eastern seaboard when our skies turned orange last summer from fires that were sometimes thousands of miles away. In Chicago, we experienced it both from the Western Canadian fires in Alberta and also the fires that were along the Eastern Canada area. And in the middle of summer, children were not allowed to play in the outdoors, and dangerous air quality affected millions of people. So droughts, storms, floods, mudslides will continue to increase as our climate changes. We are seeing mass changes in flora and fauna where the animals and plants that we see in Illinois are fundamentally changing now, sometimes by extinction, sometimes by invasive species from the south, which can accommodate to the higher temperatures we are now experiencing. So this was just yesterday. I got as an email from the New York Times, and it's official. 2023 was Earth's warmest year. And in fact, every year, I believe, of the last 5 or 6 years have been the warmest year. And 2024 is forecast to be even hotter. So what is the cause of climate change? Simply, it's fossil fuels, coal, oil, gas, and natural gas. The simple direction we need to take is to stop burning fossil fuels to power our homes, power our businesses, power our cars, and find other sources of energy, often called renewable energy for our lives. Just as a aside, so that's the Prairie State Energy Campus in Southern Illinois, and it is Illinois' largest single source of pollution, the states, and I believe it's up about seventh in the U.S. And it doesn't seem to be, we can't seem to close it. One of the problems has been that a decade or so ago, a group of 32 communities got together to pass bonds to get that energy campus going. One of them was Winnetka, another one was Naperville. I forget what some of the other communities. And it's just, it's an awful situation where this thing is still burning coal. Then you have refinery plants in Robinson, Illinois, and that the last thing is the CPV Three Rivers Energy Center is a natural gas power plant. So if we are going to address how to attack the emission problem, we need to understand the big picture. And this gives us the picture that we need to understand. This is a pie chart of where emissions are coming from in the US. Now, the largest area is transportation, and these are largely emissions produced by each of us as individuals driving our fossil fuel passenger cars and light duty trucks. Close to 60% of the transportation sector pie slice is from our personal cars and our personal light duty trucks. But we also play a large role, households, that is, our individual households play a large role in that electricity power plant size, because 70% of the electricity pie slide is also due to our demand as individuals to power our home. And so 70% of that slice is consumed by households. Finally, more than half of the emissions coming directly from buildings, mostly natural gas or oil furnace boilers, is to heat our homes. So that's what the 13% pie slide is. So this is very important to understand where greenhouse gases come from. Now, I won't bore you with the math, but if you take the share of transportation, electricity, and building emissions that are attributable to energy usage for just households, it comes up to roughly 35 to 45% of all emissions are attributable to how we as individuals heat our residences, what we drive, and how much power we use in our daily life. So Alex Lasky here, who is the chief executive of Rewiring America, a great organization that has been very helpful in developing strategies for lowering our fossil fuel usage. And we will discuss more about this organization at the end of towards the end of this presentation. But he made the following statement upon passage of the Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, and I think it's impactful, so I will read it here. 42% of all emissions result from decisions that are made at kitchen tables. That includes the cars we drive, as well as how we heat our homes, heat the water in our homes, cook our food, and dry our clothing. Electrification creates an opportunity for financial savings on the order of $1,800 a year on average across the US per household. With the Inflation Reduction Act, the average American household has an electric bank account from the act. It's got about $10,000 on average in it to help people electrify their homes. So here's another quote from earlier in 2021 from the same organization, Rewiring America. And again, it's really important that I read this too. So I'm going to read it right now. Around 40% of the United States carbon emissions, okay, so it's a little, he went up a little a year later with 42. About 40% of the United States carbon emissions come from our homes and the vehicles we drive. Simply switching everything in our lives to be powered by electricity from renewable energy will go a long way towards getting our emissions down and reducing the impact of climate change. Rewiring America estimates that to achieve zero emissions, we need to install 1 billion new machines or 50 million machines a year for the next 20 to 25 years. It's a lot, but it's very doable if everyone stops buying fossil fuel machines. As a bonus, you'll also get better performance and lower utility bills from your new electric appliances. Now, so how does electrification address the problem of emissions? Now, some may believe that our electricity is all powered by fossil fuels, which is not true. Right now, the grid that most of us on this call, if you're in the Chicago area, are on, is called the RFCW grid. And we are on the same grid in most of Chicago as Milwaukee and most of Indiana and Ohio. That grid right now is about average for the US, and 63% of the electricity on that grid is powered by coal, oil, and gas. But the remainder right now is powered by nuclear power, which does not have any carbon emissions, and renewable energy sources of wind and solar. Over time, every grid, including our RFCW grid, will be improving as more wind and solar projects come online. And I want you to notice NYUP, the upstate New York grid, is already a majority, a non-carbon emission electric generating grid. A vast percentage of that grid is nuclear as well as wind and solar. So that's hopefully the direction most of these grids will be going into. But I want to say something here. Even if the electric grid was powered 100% by fossil fuels like coal and gas, using electricity would still yield benefits and reduce emissions because there is tremendous inefficiency in each of us having our own fossil fuel machines emitting to power our cars and our household appliances. As an example, a gasoline-powered car wastes 2/3 of its emissions on excess heat, while an electric car utilizes 70 to 80% of the energy it gets in its battery that was drawn from the grid to directly propel the car. So even in a hypothetical scenario where every bit of electricity for an electric car is sourced from a coal power plant, that car would still be more than twice as efficient as a gasoline car. And the gasoline car would be the reason for twice as much greenhouse gas emissions as that electric car powered from a 100% fossil fuel electricity plant. Fortunately, there's no grid like that in the US right now, but I just wanted to say that for demonstration purposes. So now you are probably asking, how can my household's choices really make a difference? And I strongly believe it definitely does. All of us collectively have power through influencing demand for products and influencing your neighbor, family, and entire communities to shift into a different direction. Our planet's well-being relies on our decisions, and even small choices compound over time. So it's important to both view your own carbon footprint as significant, and your actions to minimize your footprint will help influence others and promote change. If Margaret Mead or Mother Teresa was around today, I'm sure they would apply their philosophy to the climate emergency we are now experiencing and urging us all to think about our carbon footprint. So we at the Chicago chapter of the Climate Reality Project have developed a pledge that you can take to prepare to transition your fossil fuel machines to alternatives that involve less or no greenhouse gas emissions. The pledge is simply this: as my home appliances and vehicles reach the end of their useful life, I pledge to be ready to replace them with electric alternatives and to encourage my family, friends, and community to do the same. So this presentation is step one in getting prepared. So thank you for attending. Now, where are we going to talk about electrifying your home? Well, we're going to be talking obviously about electric vehicles. We'll be talking about your gas furnace or electric heater and talking about converting that to a heat pump water heater. We're also going to be talking about how you clean or dry your clothes. We'll be talking about your possibility of also getting a rooftop set of solar panels. And if your house has too much shade, we'll be talking about maybe signing on to a community solar project where you see those solar farms throughout Illinois right now, signing up to basically get your own panel there to get your electricity. Now, in this discussion, the discussion about greenhouse gases can get pretty complex about the volume and the trade-offs between different ways to measure emissions. So since I think kind of visually, I'm going to try to promise that all the exhibits I'm going to show from here on out will concentrate on one way to measure our greenhouse gas emissions, and that is to use the measure of a metric ton. Now, a metric ton is of gas at normal Earth temperatures is a gas that would be the size of a two-story home, about a cube about 28 feet high and 28 feet deep. So each so a metric ton is obviously 2,200 pounds of carbon dioxide, and the average U.S. household annually emits 20 to 30 metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. So there are 124 million households in the U.S., so that means about 2.4 billion metric tons are emitted directly on behalf or for or from our households. So imagine that if you're living in a community of 10,000 homes, and then that community is on the order of 20 to 30 metric tons per home, that's a lot of gas that's going up in the air that's just contributed by ourselves. About 6.6 billion metric tons of total annual greenhouse gas emissions occur in the US annually. So keep that visual in your mind whenever I say how many metric tons each of these actions may save. So the key home electrification projects we're going to be talking about is on this page. The first one is putting home solar energy panels on the top of your house. And if you have a roof that's got exposure to the south, east, or west, and is not blocked by shade, unlike me, who has a very shady house. And we don't want anybody to cut down trees, so don't do that. But if you have a rooftop, it would save a tremendous amount of greenhouse gases. Virtually 90% of of the 4.6 metric tons can be saved. The next biggest area, it would be a heat pump, the third line. Replacing a gas furnace with a heat pump could save more than 3 metric tons. An electric car, if you have one electric car, that electric car is spewing anywhere from 4 to 8 metric tons of greenhouse gases from its tailpipe. And you can drive an electric car would basically bring that down to 2 metric tons, where all the metric tons of greenhouse gases that are emitted are from the electric power plant, not from your tailpipe. And then finally, an electric heat pump water heater, which I'll explain later, that'll save about 1 metric ton of greenhouse gases annually. And we'll also go over the federal and state rebates and tax credits you can get for getting those machines. Now, I do want to say that every one of these cases, the operating costs of these machines, what you pay in fuel costs for a car, or what your utility bills are for each one of these machines, are going to be lower than what you're experiencing now with your fossil fuel machines. But on the other hand, some of them are more expensive, and that's what the key to um, the IRA Act was, to basically find ways to give rebates and tax credits for people buying, in some cases, more expensive machines at installation. So because I'm a visual thinker, I put those same figures you saw on the previous page into this chart. And the before and the after is the blue and the orange squares, and the gray square is what you'll save. So obviously, if you have two cars and you replace both of them with electric vehicles, you might get 8 metric tons of emission savings. But just going with this example, this is a household with one car that basically emits 18.75 metric tons of greenhouse gases. And after you make this change, well more than half of the metric tons will be eliminated, or 11.56 here. So that's why it's so important to seriously consider all of these new machines or measures you can take. So the first area we're going to talk about is solar power for your roof. And this allows you to reduce emissions that are occurring at your grid. You'll reduce demand because you'll be generating much of your own power, and the grid, the power stations won't have to produce for you. By the way, the #1 solar power community in the country right now is San Diego. #2 is San Francisco, and #3 is Portland, Oregon. So, and Honolulu is on the list. Honolulu is, I think, #5. So obviously the sun shines pretty brightly there. But in Illinois, we have good experience already in getting your electricity emissions down. And in fact, my colleague, the chair of the Climate Reality Chicago chapter group, who lives in Naperville, was able to cut his usage of the ComEd grid. I believe he's on ComEd, might be Ameren, down by 90%. So that's reflected here, where the electricity sourced from the grid produced 4.6 metric tons just for that household. It went down to a ridiculously low figure, where in most months he's not paying for any utility cost, and instead he's generating enough power to sell back to the grid, to the utility provider. So in this section on a rooftop or community solar, we really have two different options. The first is rooftop solar, which is 100% clean and green energy. If you install it on your roof, your home value will increase. Like I said before, electricity savings can be more than 90%, and you still have access to the grid. And one of the important reasons you have access to the grid is you want to sell the excess energy you're producing from the roof back to the utility company so you can get further credits on that. Now, as I said before, if you can't use your roof because it's um, because there's a very nice carbon sink, otherwise known as a tree, growing right outside your house, and it's providing shade, don't cut that tree down. Instead, you can enlist in community solar, and there's a lot all over the state right now that are building up. I signed up a couple years ago to a community solar or a solar farm that's operating in Bourbonnais, Illinois. And the way they brought me on is they first analyzed my electricity bill, and they decided on the amount of the panel that the solar panel size that I needed to effectively generate electricity. Now, you have to understand that the electrons that are being generated at that solar farm are not the exact electrons I'm using. So it's more like a banking system where um, instead of getting all my energy from ComEd, I'm getting it from that solar farm, and it's going into um, the entire ledger sheet for the state or the grid. Um, so but it has allowed me to save over 20% on my um, on my electricity bill, higher in the summer, which is nice because when I save in the summer, I my summer bills, utility bills are higher because of air conditioning, and and so what is nice about this is I can, um, without signing a long-term contract or anything, I can just lower my utility costs, and it's something that everybody should do. So if you're not already on community solar, and I'll show you some slides later on how to get on it. If you have a tree in front of your house and you're not on community solar, you should do that right after this call. So if you do have a roof that's amenable to having solar panels because it gets good sunlight, then the IRA Act has done a great job in lowering your costs. So a full system might be $30,000 if you can get all the panels you need on your roof. And when you install that in your first year, you get a $10,000 tax credit. So that'll bring down the cost. Then in Illinois, remember I was talking about the credits that you get for selling um, energy back to the utility? Well, that can be given to you in a lump sum in the beginning, and that could be as high as $10,000 uh, the, based on your setup. So you can use that to defray the cost of the solar panel. So you could get the cost down to $10,000. Now, once you get a solar system like that, you probably will have close to zero as a monthly a monthly electricity cost. You know, whether it's you pay 150 or $110 a month, you'll get down to zero. So if you don't have the cash to pay for that solar panel, you can finance that amount and pay it off in 5 or 6 years, taking the monthly money that you were used to be paying the utility company, and instead finance the $10,000. And after that's paid off, basically within 6 years, you will be living free on free energy largely. As I mentioned before, community solar, what's not to like? So I know there's Highland Park on their city website has information on who you can sign up for a community solar or a solar farm. Glencoe has that as well. So I would urge you to go to those pages, or you can go to ComEd and you can sign up. And it's a great deal, and everybody should be doing this uh, as soon as possible, because who doesn't want to save money? All right, the next area is your vehicle and the need to electrify your vehicle because it is the largest sector of greenhouse gas emissions for us as John Q. Public. 81% of all vehicle miles are sourced from our personal cars. So here we have some comparison of different car types. On the left-hand side is the is an internal combustion engine. That's what ICE stands for. So that's a gasoline-powered car. And as I mentioned before, it, depending on the type of car and how many miles you drive, this is based on driving about 13,000 miles a year for a standard size car. That kind of car will emit 5 metric tons of greenhouse gases a year. Now, in the last 25 years or so, hybrids have become pretty popular, and that figure is almost half of what a typical gasoline-powered car generates in terms of greenhouse gases. Uh, Lately, we have plug-in hybrids, which operate. You can plug it into your home, and when the battery is good enough to last for 30 or 40 miles in some cases, and then if you go beyond that, then a gasoline um, engine kicks in. And then finally, you have an electric vehicles where all its emissions are down to 1.4 metric tons a year. Now, I want you to look at the color of the two bars. The bar on top, the light green bar, is our emissions um, from plugging in the car, or from electric power. And the problem with the plug-in hybrid is the tailpipe emissions will never be removed, will never be lowered. So as you continue, if those cars are continued to be bought, you're still going to have tailpipe emissions, where you're not going to have that with an electric vehicle. Further, if you're on solar, that'll really lower it to almost trivial in terms of your emissions, because then the electricity you're putting in your car is largely emission-free into your battery. But even if you don't have solar panels on your roof, an electric vehicle emissions that are due to the grid will eventually get better as the grid improves. So as more solar and wind come on, the electric vehicle performance in terms of emissions will continue to improve because the grid will get cleaner and cleaner. So that's something to consider when you make your decision. The other thing is, and many people have come to me and say, well, I'll just go with a plug-in hybrid because I'm worried about range, or worried about um, I might run out of battery juice. And I don't find that a good argument, because right now most electric cars have ranges of 250 to 300 miles. Some new electric luxury vehicles have ranges of 500 miles. So there's no need to limit this unless you think you're going to be driving in a remote area. But more importantly, what is happening when you buy a plug-in hybrid is the cost of that car is going to be very high, because you have to buy the technology for the internal combustion engine, and also the electric setup for that car. So it becomes a very high capital cost for something I think, it has dubious benefits. So um, despite the advantage of electric vehicles, uh, the United States, we're having difficulty in the United States getting people to adopt it. So, United States is only 9% of the sales in 2022 were for electric vehicles. Look at Norway, 90% of all the vehicles. Iceland, 72%. And by the way, these are very cold countries. So the argument that somehow electric vehicles are not worth it if you live in a cold climate is definitely destroyed with this graph. But we've got to do better and buy more electric cars. Now, electric, this is a forecast of sales by regions of the world for electric cars. And as you can see, China will continue to have the biggest market by far for electric cars. As battery tech continues to get better, costs continue to come down, and there are now 4 million public charging points installed around the world. All those trends will continue this year, paving the way for further growth in 2025 and 2026, when a slew of cheaper models is set to hit Western markets. I think North American car manufacturers are not correctly focusing on the market. In my opinion, they're rolling out electric cars more in the luxury category or in large SUVs like their current gasoline models, rather than focus on affordable cars. The success of the electric car industry in Asia and Europe is due to their focus on affordability. Last month, my wife and I traveled to France, and I saw advertising all over the place for economy cars that were fully electric, like a new Fiat electric 500 or a Peugeot compact electric vehicle that I think is responsible for increasing adoption of electric cars. So I'm hoping that'll occur in the US. Now, what's happening right now is that 17 US states have adopted the California clean car rules and clean truck rules, which insist that car manufacturers and car sellers in those states adopt standards for phasing internal combustion engines out and pushing in more electric vehicle sales. And the legislation or the act has that by 2035, no more internal combustion engine cars can be sold in California and the other states that have passed that have also passed this law. And I feel the manufacturers, just like with the clean air rules that were passed decades ago, had to follow California because California is such a large market that the big three automakers are going to follow this because they're going to make sure that by 2035, there'll be no internal combustion engine cars that you can buy. But it's a mystery to me why Illinois hasn't passed this. So we at Climate Reality are going to be urging our legislature to also sign on to the California rules for a total phase out of internal combustion engines by 2035 for cars. Trucks have a longer time period before they can be phased out. So the IRA, I keep on missing what was the first word? Oh yeah, it's the Inflation Reduction Act. I mean, the act was misnamed because it's more of a climate bill than anything else, but issued a $7,500 tax credit for cars that you applied for in your next year's tax returns. That's going to be improving next year when the tax credit will be available at the dealer. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the tax credit is getting harder and harder to get on certain models because the standards are being changed constantly. So, for example, I just purchased last year a Mustang Mach-E, And through March, it qualified for the $7,500 credit. Then it changed after March to a $3,500 credit or 3,750 credit. And now I just read that 2024, because of the interpretations of where the battery's assembled and what components it has, it doesn't get any, it won't get any credit this year. So unfortunately, only Chevy Bolts, Teslas, and the Ford Lightning F-150 trucks will qualify for the full rebate in 2024. Also, Chevy Bolts are going away for a year as GM initially decided to end the car and convert the plant where it was being manufactured into building another car, a larger car. So, but many of the car fans protested. So Chevy has agreed to bring that car back, but it won't be ready to manufacture that car until 2025. Um, so there's also a half credit for cars that either have a battery that is manufactured with components made in North America, or the car components are sourced and entirely assembled in North America. And for all that, the Rivians apply, although you have to buy a Rivian truck that is below 80,000. And I don't know if Rivians are that cheap, but they may be. So this shows that there are 9 great EVs with great range and reasonable cost. 7 are under 40,000. Prices have dropped 20% since last year, primarily because of competition. And Tesla is now bringing their prices way down, which is pretty much putting pressure on the other manufacturers. Unfortunately, the $7,500 tax credit from the IRA is becoming less of a factor, as only the Chevy and the Tesla on this page qualify. By the way, the Tesla Model 3 is still the highest seller worldwide. And in the United States, the Chevy Bolt is number 2. So, but I wanted to say that even with this changing of which cars apply for the $7,500 federal tax credit and which don't, EV, electric vehicles still are an equal or better value. So what I did here was try to provide you with a 5-year cost of what that car will cost you. And so obviously with the Chevy Bolt, with the $7,500 federal incentive, cash price includes taxes and any markup the dealer will have on it. So the net price will be about $26,000. And then you add in the 5-year costs of running that car, and you'll notice the fuel costs are much lower, because especially if you're charging at home, than the only gasoline car I've included on this page, which is Nissan Rogue, which is a similar car to the Chevy Bolt. But you can see the vast price difference, $37,000 over 5 years, or $37,600 over 5 years, versus almost $50,000 for the Nissan Rogue. So even if the Chevy Bolt didn't have that $7,500 federal incentive, it'd still be a better deal than the Nissan Rogue. Now, on the other hand, there are 2 very nice electric vehicles, the VW ID.4 and also the Kia Niro Electric, which I include here. And this is all from Edmunds.com, their figures. And even in their cases, roughly the same. And in fact, I would argue that these are much nicer cars than the Nissan Rogue. So that's something to consider. And by the way, prior to my owning of a Mustang Mach-E, I owned a Tesla Model 3 for 3 years. I didn't pay anything in maintenance. So I think these figures are a little high. And there were no repairs on the car. So I think the maintenance is strictly buying new tires at the end of the 5-year period. And I think these figures are kind of high. But you can see that, and the reason for that is in a internal combustion engine car, a gasoline car, there are 20,000 moving parts. So a lot can go wrong in a gasoline power car. In an electric vehicle, there are only 20 moving parts. So there's virtually no maintenance of it. There's no need for oil change. It's just tires and maybe making sure your windshield wipers are okay. So I've already talked about the tax credit. There is a tax credit for used electric vehicles, and that's for $4,000. But I believe it's got to be used for the same vehicles that qualify for the 7,500. So I don't know how important that is. Finally, I'm going to just briefly touch on why I love my Ford Mustang Mach-E. I happened to take a picture in the summer in front of the Glencoe Public Library of my car, so that was very appropriate for this presentation. I never go to a gas station. I charge at home in my own garage. I pay far less per mile to power the car, 4 cents per mile versus 16 cents per mile if I was driving a gasoline car. It's a blast to drive. It's quiet and handles extremely well. As I mentioned before, ridiculously low maintenance. It's reliable, and it's got the coolest technology on it. So, as you can tell, I'm an electric vehicle fan. Okay, the next area I'm going to talk about is a heat pump for heating and cooling. Uh, Heat pumps move heat from inside the home using a refrigerant to outside, just like an air conditioner. Uh, it moves small amounts of heat from the outside, compress the heated refrigerate to make it very hot, and move the heat inside the home. So a heat pump can replace both your gas furnace and your central air conditioner, as the process can be reversed in the summer to cool your home as effectively as your home was heated in the winter. Now, a heat pump is a versatile system that can both heat and cool a space. It operates by extracting heat from the inside the building and transferring it outside. So it's a lot like your refrigerator. You notice when your refrigerator is operating, it's keeping your food cold inside the refrigerator. But if you put your hand over the fan, there's hot air that's coming out of the vent to and so the refrigerant in the system absorbs heat from the indoor air at the evaporator coil, and then it's compressed and pumped to the outdoor unit, and there the heat is released onto the into the outside air. So that's the summer. And essentially a heat pump reverses its operation during the cooling mode compared to the heating mode. It's able to provide both heating and cooling in a house. So the savings can be huge in um, metric tons of emissions saved. The amazing thing about this is that even freezing cold air outside contains heat that can be pumped inside, and it's much more efficient to move heat than to create it. So while a natural gas furnace might deliver 80% of the heat produced from burning the gas, an electric resistance heater can use 100% of the electrical energy to produce heat. A heat pump can pump 300 to 450% worth of heat into your home for the same electrical energy input. Now, there are very different variables for how much a heat pump system could cost you, depending on your existing home system and your current setup for HVAC. So I'm not going to attempt to give you an estimate of the costs involved, as there are 3 types of heat pump systems. On the left-hand, lower-hand side is the air source system that just exchanges the heat or the cold air in your house to achieve comfortable temperatures on the inside. If you choose to use a geothermal system, where a piping system underground in your backyard can take advantage of the more moderate temperatures that are underground, that will allow lower operating costs and lower energy being used, as the outside temperature will be easier to either cool or warm for your house when sourced from the underground. But that will understandably increase the capital costs to install the system. Now, the main advantage of traditional air conditioners is their lower upfront cost, and installing a basic air conditioning system is a few $1,000s cheaper than installing a heat pump. But heat pumps after that are better in almost every way. They typically replace both an air conditioner and a furnace. And I would assume if you need to replace both your air conditioner and furnace, it will be an achievable cost for you, which means 2 major appliances for the price of one. I think heat pumps also provide more comfortable heating and cooling than basic air conditioners and furnaces, and they can save the average homeowner $10,000 over the lifespan of the unit because they run on electricity, and it also obviously frees your home from relying on heating fuels, which can um, be fluctuating, as this graph shows. And I think natural gas prices are continuing to go up. An electric heat pump will never have that fluctuation in price. And the average American homeowner probably can save at least $700 a year by switching to a heat pump in terms of their utility bills. Um, so the the Inflation Reduction Act um, has rebates and incentives for a heat pump that are pretty significant. I'll go over this again at the end, but there's a federal tax credit you can get on 30% of the cost to purchase and install a heat pump, up to $2,000. And beginning in 2024, a rebate of $8,000 of the cost to purchase and install a heat pump for low and moderate income households. And ComEd also kicks in with some discounts as well. Let me quickly go over heat pump water heaters. Heat pump water heaters, like heat pumps, move heat from inside the home using a refrigerant to outside, just like an air conditioner. And the nice thing about using a heat pump water heater is, again, you're not burning any fossil fuels, which means that you're saving at least um, a metric ton of greenhouse gases. These heat pumps cost between $1,500 and $2,500, which is more than a natural gas heater, but can be much cheaper to operate, obviously. In addition, there are rebates between $300 and $1,500, which could defray the entire increase in cost of the heat pump. And that's available from the IRA Act. Or you can qualify for a certain rebate on this and other high efficiency appliances based on your income level, and I'll show you that later. Um, you should ask your contractor for help in identifying and getting the rebates. It might cost $600 to $800 for a contractor to install the heat pump, a little more than it would with a gas-fired heat pump, and take about 6 hours. Um, as you probably guessed by now, it works in the same way. It transfers heats from the surrounding air or ground to heat water for residential use or commercial use. Um, a heat pump water uses just electricity to move heat from one place to another. And there you see, I just looked that up, the Rheem heat pump water heater for $1,700 at Home Depot. I didn't get the size of that tank, but I would assume it's pretty suitable for a home. So I'm going to discuss the last three um, fossil fuel machines I'll discuss really don't have a huge impact on your carbon footprint, but they're still interesting to consider. These all save some greenhouse gases, less than a half metric ton of greenhouse gases, unless you're running a restaurant or a laundry out of your home. So the first one is a heat pump clothes dryer. They're more efficient than gas dryers. They extract heat from the air, recycle it, and use it to dry the clothes. This process is more efficient than generating heat directly, leading to potential cost savings over time. They operate at lower temperatures than standard gas dryers. The lower temperatures are gentler on fabrics, reducing the risk of over drying or damaging delicate clothing. Many heat pump dryers come equipped with moisture sensing technology, which adjusts the drying time accordingly. I think a heat pump clothes dryer really is misnamed. It really operates as a moisture extractor for your clothes. So instead of baking your clothes to dry them, they use a process similar to your air conditioner to dehumidify your clothes. The cost up front is a few $100s more, but it is definitely cheaper to run than an electric or gas-fired clothes dryer, and the cost is equal to those machines if you qualify for the rebates that I'll show you a little later. And then in these last two appliances, an induction stove top and an induction oven are two intriguing options that really have minimal savings in greenhouse gases, but you may want to consider due to safety and eliminating harmful indoor air pollution. Natural gas stovetops can contribute to indoor air pollution primarily through the combustion process and byproducts produced during cooking. The combustion of natural gas can release various pollutants into the indoor air, posing health risks like carbon monoxide and particulate matter. Nitrogen oxide can, or nitrogen dioxide, can irritate the respiratory system, leading to respiratory systems such as coughing, wheezing, and shortness of breath. Prolonged exposure may contribute to respiratory problems and exacerbate existing conditions such as asthma. So the way induction ovens and induction cooktops work is they use magnetic induction to heat cookware directly. They work by inducing an electric current in the metal of the cookware, and this produces the heat. The heat is generated within the cookware itself, allowing for precise and efficient cooking. So if you touch the top of an induction stovetop, right where the supposed burner is, you're not going to feel anything unless you have a magnetic hand, I suppose. And induction ovens and stovetops are more energy efficient than traditional electric ranges and gas ranges. The direct transfer of heat to the cookware results in faster heating times and greater precision. They heat up and cool down much more quickly. The downside is you might have to get some cookware that is compatible with this induction technology. Although you can check your cookware right now. If a magnet sticks to your cookware, then you're ready to go with this. So these are the rebates that are available, and it's based on income, I believe, from the IRA Act, based on your previous year's tax return. And there's a computation made of where your income level is. And then based on your income level, you can qualify for a number of these rebates, like a heat pump HVAC is $8,000 if you qualify. Clothes dryer, $840. Heat pump water heater, $1,750. The biggest tax credits, however, which is not on that page, is for a geothermal heat pump, which is uncapped. So if you remember, the geothermal heat pump is one where you are running piping into your backyard. There's an uncapped 30% tax credit on the purchase and installation, and I don't believe there's any income limits on that. Same as for solar panels, a 30% tax credit on that, uncapped. So a lot of these figures and a lot of advice you can get is from this website I mentioned before, rewiringamerica.org. And you can go through the website, or they have a great guide, a PDF that you can download, Electrify Home Guide, which will provide a lot of answers as to how, what rebates you can take advantage of and how to start. So basically, I want to conclude by saying it's really your choice as to how you want to go forward. You can either be part of the solution on the right, or you can just, decide not to participate in attempting to limit our carbon footprint in the US here. And so one of the ways you can be ready is to contact a professional to perform an energy audit on your home. Installation contractors, local energy efficiency programs through ComEd are all good resources for energy audits. So that's part of the I Pledge to Be Ready. Once you address those factors and make the repairs or improve the insulation in your home, you will be ready to start replacing your gas furnace and gas appliances with the maximum efficiency of climate-friendly appliances. So we have this pledge on the Chicago Chapter Climate Reality webpage. You can also go there, and we also have links to the Rewiring America and also provide you with some helpful information. Once you take the pledge, you'll see all those links. But if you don't want to take the pledge, you can still go to climaterealitychicago.com/electrification resources. And there'll be a lot of links there to help you find contractors, to understand the rebates and the tax credits that you may be able to get. Lastly, we have this, what we call an activist electrification pledge proposal, where we have a second part of the pledge, and that is we're sort of asking people, if you really feel strongly about this, we urge you to take action and meet with your elected officials and go to community events and do events like we're doing today. And we urge you to join Climate Reality if you want to go beyond the pledge. In addition to our efforts to educate, like today's meeting, we are a group of activists who have been pressuring organizations to step up and meet today's climate challenges. Among our activities over the past few years was to successfully convince the Pace Suburban Bus Authority to stop ordering fossil fuel buses and become totally electric by the year 2040. We have also been the leading chapter, even though we're called the Chicago chapter, in advancing agricultural regenerative legislative action in the U.S. Congress and making sure that best practices are followed throughout the nation. Our trees and agroforestry team is lobbying hard to preserve and expand our tree canopy in the city and the suburbs. We also have a group leading efforts to divest and defund many of our public investments like pension funds from fossil fuel industries. But we need more people to write more, talk more, be more visible, get on radio stations and in newspapers to extend our message. So if you like talking to your local elected officials in your hometown or your city or the people who regulate these things, consider joining our organization. We need your voice on important issues that will affect your state and your city. So if you are interested in joining Climate Reality, there's my email at the bottom, brucemainzer@gmail.com. And I think now it's time to take questions.
Hi, thank you so much, Bruce. This is a wonderful presentation. You made a really clear and compelling case for what climate change is doing, and you gave us a lot of really practical, relatable information. In the background, I was shopping for electric cars, I gotta say.
Call me, I can give you some advice.
Excellent, thank you. And it was also very good to hear what Climate Reality Project is doing. Obviously, a lot of important stuff happening there. So thank you very much. All right, I think we are ready for a few questions and answers. It's getting a little late, so we're just going to take a few, I think, and that would be perfect because you've been so comprehensive in your information. It's terrific. Okay. Oh, just a little bit of feedback here from Kim, who says, I've had a VW ID4 for over a year and not spent anything yet on maintenance. Good to know. Gail asks, what happens to electric sources during the 6 to 8 times a year that the power goes off in our area? What happens then if you have solar power, I think is her question.
Well, if you have solar power, you're not going to be affected unless you are running something that exceeds your solar power. So you're actually in good shape. And You know, what's also happening is an electric car can serve to be a power source from your car when the grid for your house when your grid goes down. The Ford F-150 right now has a capability to power your home in the case, so you don't have to buy a generator in the case that your power grid goes down.
Hey, excellent. Thank you. Question from Richard, who says, can I get a copy of your presentation? Yes, you certainly can. The video will probably be up on our websites in a day or two, and you are welcome to forward that, Richard, to, he says he's the co-chair of the Northeast Ohio CRP chapter and would
Yeah,
like.
I'll get it to him through
Okay.
our communication. We have a hub that we communicate to other chapters with, so I'll do that.
Excellent. And so nice to know that we have somebody watching from Ohio. So thanks for that, Richard. All right. Let me see what else. Kind of covered a lot of this. Oh, here's an interesting one. James writes, I've read about community organizations that work to get many households in a municipality to agree to adopt solar and then contract with one installer to keep the cost down. Are you familiar with this movement and what are your thoughts?
I'm not familiar with that movement, but there are some very good people in the Highland Park area and Glencoe area and throughout the state that are experts on solar power. So I would urge people to go to their to the Highland Park page where they have a list of vendors and check those out, and also the Glencoe page.
Okay, thank you. Another question about community solar is Nello makes the point that that's just an accounting entry, that you still get your electricity from ComEd.
Right. So yeah, so I'm not getting the actual electrons that my panel is creating in Bourbonnais, Illinois, but it operates like a banking system. So and it's important that we all do this because the more we support these solar farm operators, the less we'll have to get electricity from the grid. So we just need to grow that as much as possible.
Okay. Thank you. I got a correction. That question I asked you toward the beginning here about what happens when there's a power outage 6 to 8 times a year. And I assumed that the questioner was asking about solar, and she writes back that no, the question was for all electrically powered households. So for example, if the power goes out and you have electric heat, does your heat go out? And then what happens? I think that's what she's getting at.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that happens now because even gas furnaces have to shut off, I believe, if the electricity goes out because your fan runs on electricity. So it's not much of a difference. And there's many people who have all electric appliances now, so it's no different.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Gail, for clarifying that. Kim says, thanks to Bruce for sharing this excellent information. Is there a good resource or calculator that people can use to compare vehicles?
I just discovered the Edmunds site, the Edmunds.com site. They have a forecast of what you'll likely pay, and then they have the comparisons, and they do that for every kind of car model out there. So I would recognize that, knowing that the fuel costs, that's easy to calculate on your own, but the other costs I think are really good from the Edmunds site.
Thanks. Quick comment from apparently your sister Sandy, who says, just a comment that I'm proud of my big brother for diving into protecting our planet.
A Highland Park resident.
Thank you, Sandy. That's nice. And then finally, last question, John wants to know, when will the Illinois IRA rebates become available? I think you touched on that, but there was another question about that too. Maybe it wasn't clear to some people.
I think they're rolling out now. I know that the most recent ones were just passed, and I think they're effective 2024. Most of them are now rebates, but there are some that are still tax credits. So if you buy something in 2024, you'll get the tax credit when you do your tax return in 2025. But they're available now.
Okay, good to know. Thank you again for sharing your time and your expertise. We had a lot of people watching, and I hope a lot of people will pay you some heed for what you've conveyed tonight. Thank you to the Highland Park Library for organizing this, and to Juan Rodriguez for being in the background, making sure that everything worked fine. And thank you to all of you for your interest. We'll see you in the next one. Thank you.
Good
And
night. Good night, everyone. And Bruce, thank you. And Grace, wonderful to partner together as always.
definitely. Good night.